Welcome to Ditch Auto. My name's Jared, and today we're going to take a look at the GoPro Hero5. This is the newest version of the GoPro with the touchscreen and everything on the back, and I thought I would give a general walkthrough of using this camera. Now, this is the first time that GoPro has ever included a touchscreen in the back to this magnitude. Obviously, there are a couple of GoPros that you can get with a screen on the back, but this is the first time that they've implemented a full menu and all of this good stuff, and it really makes the camera a lot easier to use. So we're going to take a look at the camera, and then in a second video, I'm going to come back and I'm going to show you some of the settings that I find a must to go and adjust with this camera to get the best quality images out of it. So the camera has two buttons. It has a shutter button up on the top, and this actually also will quick jump you into the camera. So basically one button push and you're recording. If I push this button like so, it's going to go ahead and power up the camera and start recording. You can see the little red light came on the back and it started recording. If I push it again, it goes ahead and saves that image or video, whatever mode I was in, and then it goes ahead and powers off the camera. So to me, this is a great feature. It was what first came in the GoPro Session, the little cube camera, and then of course Sony has had this for a while, and so it's a nice feature just to quickly get into the camera. But depending on what setting you have set as your default, that is what's going to immediately jump into when the camera powers on. So I recommend you go in and set your default mode to whatever you want the camera to power up to. In my tests, it's powered up into whatever mode that I was last in, but it's best just to go ahead and put that default mode in. For me, the main purpose in wanting the camera to power up fast and start recording is for video, so I have it go to video camera mode as opposed to photo mode or one of the other modes. So when the camera's powered up normally, starting and stopping recording, taking photos, starting a time-lapse or a burst series or any of that stuff obviously takes place by pressing down the shutter button. But when you go from a powered off state and then pressing that button, it powers the camera on and then starts to do whatever you have set as the default mode, whether that's shoot video, whether that's take photos, start a time-lapse, whatever, and then when you press it again, it stops it. Otherwise, you can simply press and hold the mode button on the side for a second or two, and then it will power up the camera. And so you can see my camera has powered up right here, and it's basically ready to go. I can now start and stop my recording because my default mode is that camera mode, that video camera mode, and so I can start and stop, or of course I can go and switch my modes. So once you're in the back of the screen here, you have different swipe methods and different taps that can do different things. You have your main screen here, and you can tap in the center of the screen to get the complete camera view. You can see here my camera is just pointing at the table, which is why it's a little blown out. I can tap back into the middle of the screen and I get my screen back with all of my display options, my battery, how much time I have left on the card for recording, so about 2 hours. Or if I was in photo mode, it would show how many photos I have left. It lets me know that location is turned on, so it's using GPS to record the location to my photos. Also, the little Wi-Fi signal in the top left-hand corner lets me know that Wi-Fi is enabled on this device, so I can connect it to my phone and control the camera from my phone. Then down at the bottom, we have the ability to switch our camera mode. So you can see here we're in video mode right now. We have our video resolution, and I'm shooting in 2.7K. More about why I shoot in that mode later. 60 frames per second and field of view wide. And then we also have some kind of quick options over here on the left that let us know we're in Pro Tune mode, and then just some of the other options that are available. So I can tap on the screen here in the bottom left and change my camera mode. You can see we have our video modes, which is video, video plus photo, and looping video. We also have photo modes such as photo, night, and burst. And then we also have time-lapse modes as well. Time-lapse video, that mode is going to go ahead and create an actual time-lapse and make it a video. When you have time-lapse photo mode, it's going to create a time-lapse by taking individual photos and saving those to the card. So time-lapse video actually creates a video for you automatically, no work needed. time-lapse photo saves a bunch of photos. They're each going to be a certain amount of time, one frame basically, but a certain amount of time spaced apart. And then you take all those photos and you put them in some sort of an application that then makes a movie out of them. Or you can also get night lapse photo, which is a special mode that's best for nighttime time lapses. And it's also a photo mode. So if you're looking for a time lapse that is an extremely quick, I want to shoot a time lapse, I want to transfer it to my phone and upload it, you're probably going to want to choose the time lapse video mode. Now, one of the things that just happened is that this camera does have voice enabled, and so I'm able to start a video or take a photo or start the mode that I just said out loud, and then the camera is going to go ahead and start doing it. So it's kind of neat, but you can inadvertently start something like I just did, which is no big deal. It was just kind of funny that it happened here on the camera. So I'm going to go ahead and put the camera back in video mode, and we're going to take a look at the resolutions. You have your different resolutions at the top, and then you have your additional resolutions down at the bottom. So you can see we've got everything from as big as 4K down to 480, which is really a small video, almost too small to display on pretty much anything these days. Now, if you're wanting to create video that's going to look good when people watch it on their smartphones or on their computer or their televisions, I highly recommend that you stay at 1080 and above. Now, you can go into resolutions lower than 1080, and basically all you're going to get is higher frame rates. So, for example, I can toggle through these frame rates here. You can see I can go all the way up to 120 in 1080. If I go down to 960, then I can also, that's 120 is the highest. So I might have to go down to 720 before I get a higher, 240. So these frame rates, basically, just to give you a quick explanation, the frame rate is how many frames are being squished into 1 second, so frames per second. So obviously the more frames that are being squished into 1 second, that means you can create a slow motion video that is stretched out and made slower. So the more frames that you have available, the more you can stretch that out into a longer slow motion to make that slow motion even slower. If you are shooting, for example, let's go back into 1080. So we're in 1080. That's another thing that the GoPro doesn't do very well, is it automatically change things. So it doesn't let me change it back until I put it into an applicable frames per second. So I'm going to go ahead and choose 30 and then go to 1080. So this is typical. Shooting 1080, which is regular HD, full HD, at 30 frames per second. 30 frames per second is fairly standard for for television, broadcast, and stuff like that. Now, if you were to try and make a slow motion video out of 30 frames per second, you wouldn't have any additional frames to stretch out, and you'd end up with kind of a weird feeling slow motion. There'd be maybe some blur, some frame bending in there, and it just wouldn't be a very attractive slow motion. So if you think that you're going to be making slow motion videos out of your footage, I highly recommend shooting at as high or a higher frame rate than 30 frames per second. I typically shoot at 60 frames per second by default, because when you go, if you're going to edit this video on your computer in the GoPro editor or Final Cut Pro or any of the apps that are available, I had to shut off my camera by using words. If I'm going to go ahead and edit my video, I can squish those frames back down. So 60 frames per second, I can convert that down to 30. Much easier than going in the opposite direction. You can't take 30 frames and stretch it out to 60 or 120 or whatever without having some sort of loss. So I always start out a little bit higher, and the only time that I go above 60 frames per second is if I know for sure that I am going to be making something that I want to slow down quite a bit. Then I would go and go to a higher frame rate. You can just shoot higher frame rates all the time, but that takes up extra data, uses more of the camera battery. I mean, there's sacrifices in there. So I recommend just picking a happy medium and staying with that. So I need to power up my GoPro again. So let's just go ahead and do that. I, for one, am not completely familiar with all of the voice actions yet. Let me show you a little bit about that since we keep getting interrupted by these voice actions. So if I swipe down, you can see there is a little voice activation button right here, and I can toggle that on and off. Pretty cool. I can also go into preferences and then scroll down a little bit, and you can see here we've got the voice control. We could turn that on and off. We can choose the language, and then we have our commands. And so you basically have to use the word GoPro at the beginning of any command. So that way I can't just say, take a picture, and it's going to take a picture. I have to say, GoPro, take a photo. And then it's actually going to do that. And so it just did take a photo while I was, using that voice command. So it's really nice to have the voice commands, because if you have your GoPro mounted somewhere, if you have it mounted on your, and it just mistook my my action, my voice, what I just said, and switched me into time-lapse mode. So if you have your let me just turn this off. If you have your GoPro set up somewhere, if you have it mounted on something, and it's just not easy to touch it, to activate it, you can use the voice actions, and I think they're extremely useful. Obviously, GoPro knows that they are a little bit of a distraction and can cause a problem, so that's why they made that quick action when you swipe down to be able to toggle these on and off. So while we're talking about the swipe down menu, let's take a look here. We can also lock our screen. With your screen locked, that means you're not going to accidentally be able to tap and make any mistakes. But notice the little swipe down comes, and we can swipe down and tap to unlock our screen once again. So I'm going to go ahead and put my camera back in the appropriate menu. When we swipe down, we also get our preferences, and so we can look at our preferences. But our preferences aren't the same as our camera settings. We're going to look at preferences. We have camera tour, we have some basic stuff, date and time. One side note, I highly recommend when you get your camera and anytime you have any changes to your time and date to make sure that your camera is updated. When you go to upload videos from your camera to your phone or to your computer or whatever, the date and time is embedded in that actual file. And these days we're uploading stuff to Facebook, YouTube, all these different places, and a lot of these are taking the date and time out of the file and writing that to the post. So if I take a photo and I have my date and time set to like a month ago and I upload that photo to Facebook, it may actually post that photo like a month ago. It does that. And then the same thing if you use a service to back up your photos. Like I upload all of my photos and even a lot of my video clips to Google Photos, and it sorts all of those by the date that's written on the file. And if I took a picture and uploaded it to that, I wouldn't be able to find it. It would be really hard to find it because it might be filed back a couple of months ago, and that wouldn't make sense to me because I just took that photo. It should be at the top of the list. So make sure that you set your date and time on your camera. Voice control, we just went over that. The beep volume is pretty loud on this little camera, so I recommend maybe changing the beep volume to low or maybe even turning it off. The nice thing about the beep volume is that if your camera does shut off or it stops recording or does anything for any reason, you're gonna hear a beep. The annoying thing about the beep is the beep itself. I just find the beep annoying on my DSLR cameras and all that other stuff. I turn off the beep because whenever you press down the shutter, it beeps and it's just really annoying. But on a GoPro, you typically kind of set the camera somewhere, you hit record and you're not looking at the camera, and that beep can help you fix a problem. If your camera runs out of memory or something, or the battery goes dead, it will beep before shutting off or beep before doing anything. And that beep may be what you need to notice that there's a problem. So I leave my beep on, I leave my LEDs on. Quick capture is that ability to basically hit the shutter button. So I leave quick capture on because I like the fact that quick capture is on. We set our default mode right here, which is what I talked about earlier. You can set your default mode to any of the camera modes. I have mine set to video. And then you can also set your auto off, which is going to power down your camera when it hasn't been doing anything for a certain amount of time, which helps save battery. That's pretty important on such a small camera. We also have our touch display. We can have our screensaver turn on after a minute. We can set our brightness levels, and then we can set auto rotation of the camera display, which is pretty great. GPS, definitely want to have GPS turned on, I think, with taking photos. Especially having that GPS data written to the photo is good, because then when you upload that photo, it's easy to remember where you took the photo because the GPS data is there. HDMI output, the HDMI port that is in the side of your camera, if you were to plug in an HDMI cable to that and then plug it into a TV or something else, there are different modes for that. And then, of course, down below we have our format options for our SD card and the ability to reset our camera to default settings. Now, I recommend when you put a card in your camera, a memory card, that you format it from within the camera. Do not format it on your computer and then put it in your camera, because the formatting preferences on your computer may be different than what the GoPro camera prefers. So I recommend formatting your card inside the camera once you know for sure that you have everything off of the card that you need. I found it's just best just to buy a card and use it only with your GoPro. Don't use it with your GoPro and then put it in your phone and then put it in something else. Buy a card and use it just in your GoPro, because if you're bouncing a card around between multiple devices, you can have your card go bad. You can have your card drop files. You can just have issues with things. All of these different cameras, they have their own way of formatting. The phones, they have their own way of formatting. I recommend formatting your card inside the camera itself, and then not using that card elsewhere, because you may forget. You may leave files on there that are in another folder, and when you go, let's get out of our preferences here, and when you go swipe from the left-hand side to see what's in your media library, it's not going to show you the files, the music and stuff that might have been on your phone when you had that SD card. It's not going to show you the things that were in your other folders. It's only going to show you what's in the GoPro folder. And if you format that card and you had stuff on the card that you really wanted, you've now lost that stuff. So that's a bummer. That's a big bummer. All right, so we've swiped down, we've looked at that menu, we just swipe to the side and we can see our previous media. So any photos or video that we've taken, we can tap on that to play it back. We can trash can it, get rid of it. We can also, flag it or whatnot. I mean, there's different things you can do here with that. So let's go ahead and just get out of this. Some of these options in the back of the camera, I don't really mess with them too much. I will look at some of my previous media just to make sure I got the shot or make sure I got the photo, but I don't do any of like the little clipping and editing and features on the back of the camera. It's just too small of a screen. You can do that with the app on the phone, which is a pretty decent app. Or of course you can just transfer the files to your computer and edit them there. So resolution, frames per second, field of view, camera options. On the right-hand side, if we swipe in, we get our camera settings, and these are super important. And these are going to vary depending on what camera mode that you're in. If you're in video mode, it's going to be a certain set of settings. If you're in photo or time-lapse mode, it's going to be a certain set of settings. You can see from my settings here what I typically leave as my defaults. However, every single time that I go and mess with what resolution I'm shooting in, 1080p, 2.7K, any of those, it resets my shutter. I always leave my shutter speed at 1/60th, and then you can see the rest of my settings here. Video stabilization, I turn on because I found that I like having a little bit of stabilization, and as long as I'm shooting in a pretty high resolution, obviously stabilization doesn't work in 4K, but if I'm shooting in 2.7K, that stabilization definitely helps. And then auto low light is pretty good because if you are in really low light situations, it helps, the software helps break down some of the noise, some of the stuff, and give you a clearer image. Obviously, sometimes this option could get you in trouble, so I recommend that you test it. Don't just set it and forget it, because sometimes if you take these cameras in lower light situations, the video becomes very grainy and it's just not very attractive video to look at. So auto low light can definitely get you in trouble sometimes. And then manual audio control, I leave it set to stereo only unless I have my camera mounted to something that's going to be moving, or if it's a windy day. If it's a windy day, I set it to wind only. because it does cut down on the wind noise. There typically isn't too many ways that you can get better audio into these cameras without adding things. Obviously, there is a way to plug in a microphone, add better audio that way, but it requires adapters and microphones and stuff like that. So I rely on the camera getting the best audio that it can, and that means choosing either stereo only if you know that wind noise isn't going to be an issue, or if you're moving, things are, the camera is moving and wind is coming across the camera, set it to wind only. It's definitely a good option to have in the camera. I'm glad that you're able to determine that now and not have it set to just auto all the time. So that gives you a pretty decent little walkthrough of the camera. I'm going to go ahead and power it down really quick just so that we can look at the different covers on the back of the camera. On the bottom of the camera, we have our battery right here and our micro SD card. Just to show you the SD card that I'm using, I am using a Lexar 1800X 64 gig card. This is kind of a pricey card, but it's also a very fast card. When I'm shooting time lapses or burst photos, you need to have a fast card. Link in the description below will be to a couple of different cards. I'll put this card in there, and then I'll also put 2 other cards that I think are good, definitely good enough for the GoPro to get good performance out of. And then we also have this other kind of bay on the side. I have a love-hate relationship with this latch. And in here we have our HDMI port, and then we also have our USB-C port, which is for charging the camera. It is for plugging it into your computer. It is for using a microphone adapter jack or anything like that. So definitely a useful port. Unfortunately, though, it's only good for one thing at a time. You can either charge it while it's plugged into your computer, or use it as a microphone port if you have the appropriate adapter. Make sure when you put these back on that they are latched appropriately, that they are closed appropriately, because if you don't, the waterproofness of the camera will not work and you will end up with a dead camera. So pretty cool. The GoPro Hero 5 is definitely a huge improvement over previous models. The image quality is a little bit better. The settings are definitely better. We are able to do more with our camera, and having all of that in a touchscreen on the back means not always having to mess around with the GoPro app, which is a decent app. It's just a process of keeping it connected, and you got to have your phone and everything, and it's just a pain. So having everything on the back of the screen, definitely good. As I mentioned, there are a few links in the description below. If you haven't yet bought a GoPro and you want to see the specs and pricing and all that good stuff, there's an Amazon link below that'll take you over to Amazon, where I found is one of the best places to get the best pricing on GoPros. We'll be back with another video that shows you the top 5 settings. I want to show you my camera settings and the top 5 settings that I change on my GoPro, on all the GoPros that I use, because it's super important to get the best quality shot that you can get. So hey, thanks so much for checking out this video. We hope to see you back here on Ditch Auto. Make sure to hit that subscribe if you want to get notified when we put out more videos. Hit that thumbs up if you found this video useful. We hope to see you soon. Thanks a lot.